Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast.
We're going to go with one of our favorite podcast formats, which is the hot takes format. We're going to just hit a few different topics, give a 5 to 7 minute breakdown of it, and then move on. So these come directly from questions that we've received through social media. Actually, maybe specifically Satya has received. I'm not sure if any of these came through my channel.
I think some of them did. It's a mix.
Maybe. Yeah, it's a mix. It's a mix.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it's more heavily weighted towards your DMs. People aren't sliding into my DMs enough these days.
Okay. But there is a phenomenon, though, which I've definitely experienced working here, where people come to me when they don't want to bother you.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm like the safer option. Like, I don't want to bother Marcus, but yeah, when you really
No, I do
thing.
get. Yep. No, all right. Okay. Well, number one, what's on the list?
Number one, the midday slump and energy drinks.
Mm-hmm.
Should you have energy drinks to get through that? What do you do to get through the midday slump?
Yeah. Do you have midday slumps?
Oh, hell yeah, but especially before I stopped eating a bag of Sour Patch Kids for dinner.
Oh, man. So what are you doing instead of your midday Sour Patch Kid?
Actually, like, the midday energy slump is usually when I would start going for the Sour Patch Kids. Like, you know, that would be my go-to. I would eat some candy, and it didn't work.
No? Not effective?
Womp, womp, womp.
I mean, look, I think it's I think this is like, there's two camps people could fall into here, but like midday slump often I think is like between like 2 and 4 p.m. maybe for people, and it's like you've gotten through the early start of the day, you've charged through that, got to lunch, maybe you left lunch, you got back into what you were doing, and then like that postprandial, like, you know, wave of whatever, you know, of hormones going on and postprandial just means like after lunch, like there's changes physiologically happening inside of you, and it's starting to feel a little weird, feeling a little different. And this, you have to understand, like, this is normal physiology. Like, you're not supposed to be peaking right in the late afternoon. You know, you're supposed to peak in the morning. It's when you wake up and you got all this cortisol surging in your body, and then that gradually just declines over the course of the day to the point where, like, when it's time for bed, you should, you know, be at the lowest point, like the sun is going down, and, you know, you go to bed. Mm-hmm. So to like artificially try and ramp that back up in the evening, I think is definitely like it's a risky maneuver. It's not like ideal. But I understand it's like if you're starting to fade at like 3 and you've got like stuff to do, or like specifically you choose to work out after, you know, at the end of your day,
yeah, then
you want to have something that helps ramp you up.
Yep.
So for me, you know, the days of me like reaching for a coffee, totally gone.
Me too.
You know, that is absolutely going to impact your ability to like get into deep sleep cycles, and that's just gonna compound this problem, because you won't get really good recovery from your sleep, and that's just gonna bump into the next day and the next day. So a pretty hard cutoff on like energy drinks or caffeine. For me, like well before noon, it's like 11 o'clock, maybe 10 o'clock, like that's my last one. And I've actually gotten off of caffeine completely in the last 3 months, so that's been, you know, a big support to me. But then I was like, I'm having decaf coffee. I was like, oh, it's 1 o'clock, I'll have another little decaf. But like, that's a little tiny bit of stimulant in there, and that's even impacting me. So no to the energy drinks. I would say alternatives though are get yourself into something cold, right? If you jump into cold water, if you take a quick cold shower, like there's a nervous system sympathetic drive that you're going to get that will wake you up.
Yep.
Get some fresh air and breathe. So go for like a brisk 10-minute walk, right? Where you're just like, you're breathing heavily, maybe break a little bit of a sweat. Go out. Like the other thing is like get some midday, like sunshine. Like and doesn't matter what season it is, like just go out in the middle of the day when the sun is at its peak exposure and take in that type of light into your eyes, whether it's, overcast or not. That's an important thing to do. So that's where the walk kind of, does the same thing.
Yeah.
So those would be my 3 recommendations for a midday slump. And if you can extend that little aerobic effort out a little bit longer, like I've, my Thursday's my rest day. I go for a mountain bike ride. It's not really resting, but like I ride on Thursdays, and I've been timing it. Like I get all this work done in the morning, and then like right around like 1 or 2, I go for my ride, and then I'm like, I'm up, like I'm awake because I just did all this breathing, and it really like, gives me a second wind to finish out the work day before I go and pick up kids.
Yeah. I'll add a few more to the list. One thing I've tried recently is Cliff. He's our director of ops. He's very in favor of the 10-minute nap. And I'm a little bit afraid of it because I don't want to fall into deep sleep and feel groggy. But it's literally lie down on your back, close your eyes, 10 minutes, set the timer. And then it's just, if you do fall asleep, it's just very, very light sleep, and it can be very refreshing. So could be something that could work.
Yeah.
I'll do a little like Steezy Studio hip hop class, that's my
Cool.
movement sometimes to perk myself back up. That works well. Or I'll try to strategize my day so that I know I'm going to have an energy slump, and I'll do things like, okay, 3-4 o'clock, I'm going to try to like kind of be done with everything so I can just like do my housework then, or things where I'm just sort of like, I don't need to be fully alert mentally or physically to get those done, but it depends on your schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. Or create a task list that you just is mindless stuff that you can do at that time.
Yep.
And then if you are working out in the evening, and that's like your preferred time for training, and you've been hitting that slump, then I think an extended warm up is really important. I think the extended warm up is, I don't need as much warm up like at 9 a.m. if I'm training, but if I'm training at 3 p.m., like I need, a 15-minute warm up instead of a 5-minute warm up. Mm-hmm. And that with some breathing, with some cardio in there, really is going to help change that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. Next
up is macronutrients. Do you need to be dialed specifically to every single macro, or is it okay to just hit your protein and intuitively eat the rest?
We've covered this a lot recently, but especially in our newsletters that we've been sending out, the evidence really says that what's most important for pretty much like all health performance metrics is hit your protein, hit your calorie goal. Mm-hmm. All the rest will all kind of fall in line. Now you can optimize it maybe by like getting certain carbs or certain fats, but really what it comes down to is like getting the certain carbs or certain fats like perfect or dialed tends to just be another tool for people being consistent and being like accountable to their own total caloric and protein goals. What I mean by that is somebody might not really have a very good intuitive or flexible approach to eating. Like I kind of feel like I'm that person a little bit. Like if I get flexible, like it's not great for me. Like I'll end up overeating. But if I'm pretty consistent with my numbers and I aim to hit certain things and I keep the food choices in a slightly narrower range, I'm very much, it's much easier for me to be consistent. And so the answer to, as I see it, is protein and calories are number one priority. If dialing in your macros, like your carbohydrates and your fats, helps you hit that too and helps you stay consistent, then I think it's great. And if you're really focused on performance, or optimizing your performance when you're in the gym, then you might probably want to really focus on carbohydrates and what's the optimal amount of carbohydrates for you to perform the best while not overeating or undereating calories. I think that's key for people too. Carbs really impact performance for people in the gym and with training. Yes, you can be a keto person and perform well, but in most cases, having a little bit more carbohydrate on hand when you're doing intense training that impacts your nervous system and is glycolytic in nature helps. So, you might set a protein number, you might set like your calorie number, and then you might set like, I never go below this on carbs, because if I go below this on carbs, my training suffers.
Yeah.
That could be an approach.
Yeah. I think I'd suggest that someone really start with those two things, protein and calories, and see how that does. Like, just really, really doing that fully can take you extremely far.
I would go even a step further and say, just start with the protein. Like, don't worry about your calories at first. Like, for a lot of people who aren't even, they don't track, but they're grossly under eating protein. Just start eating enough protein, measure that, and then don't measure the calories for a while.
Yeah.
Because if you can, we're always looking for like, what's one behavioral change or one nutrition change that I can make that gets me 80-90% of the way to my goal. If I can just do that one thing, then why do all the other steps?
Yeah.
And when you eat more protein, that will indirectly help control for calories too. So, and that's why our protein challenge is basically like, start with high quality foods, like substitute as many non-processed things for processed things as you can, and eat enough protein and drink water and get your, 10,000 steps a day, and you are crushing life. Yeah, you might just be winning.
Yeah, you will be winning.
Yeah. I mean, winning like, oh, I got everything I wanted. I don't need anything more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next one?
Yep.
Okay. This one I know came to your DMs because I have no follow-up notes on it.
Oh.
But it was sauna and recovery tools. You're like, make a note. Someone was asking about it.
Sauna and recovery tools.
I was like, what about it?
Well, I mean, I post sauna and recovery stuff. I know what the context here is. Well, it's like, should I be doing these things, or is the act of doing these things becoming a chore for people, and to the point where it's like, it's no longer recovery. It's like, now it's just another list of things you have to do every single day.
Yeah.
And there's been some very popular, entrepreneur, influencers. I don't even know what bucket they fall into, but they're like, look, I made $100 million and I wake up and have a cup of coffee and I go to work. Like, I don't meditate, I don't journal, I don't do gratitude. Like, I don't need to sauna and cold plunge. I don't need to do any of that. Can you imagine that? Like, I just drink a cup of coffee and I get after it, and I'm rich. Like, I have not made my bed in the last 5 years, and I'm still making millions of dollars.
I haven't spontaneously combusted.
Yeah. So, but because I have this relationship with morning rituals that, or recovery, what bucket them as recovery or morning rituals that has felt, really positive, and then also at times felt like really like this is getting in the way of what matters and what's, making me feel good or making me feel confident, complete, less anxious, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where, people are looking for like, what recovery tools should I add to the mix? And I'm like, first, do you need to add any recovery tools to the mix? Why are you chasing a recovery tool? Like, what's the, or the new tool or the new, not self-help tool, but like just something that's like supposed to better you. It's like, well, is it because what's wrong in the first place, and how are you going to measure whether it's making a change? And then when you implement something like that, recognize that this stuff takes time. It's like 30-minute sauna, 3-minute cold plunge, 10-minute journaling, plus the transitions between them. And then you got to go and go for a 30-minute walk. And then you have to have your lemon water thing and that cocktail. And then you have to like do this. It's like, okay, well, 2 hours later, like you're ready to do what? Like now you can go and have a shit. Like, it's like, now I got everything out of the way. Now I'm ready to poop. You know, it's like, what is the goal?
Yeah.
You know, are you just trying to fill time? And are you trying to just become disciplined and have a routine that you stick to? Do you wake up and you feel crummy and therefore you're like, I need to do something that's going to improve my sleep. And so I'm going to have this ritual at night where I do these 3 things and that's going to help me sleep. And then I'm going to wake up and I'm going to start feeling more alive and energetic and I'm going to be able to do more work and, or be more present with my kids or whatever whatever the thing that drives you is. 'Cause all these things can work to improve recovery to a certain extent, but like recovery is just totally, personal. Like there's, you could even wear a Whoop and it could say like your HRV is going up or you're like in the green more. It's like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
How do you feel in your brain, in your body, in your spirit? Like, and that's something I think is just missed is like, is this creating more for me? Like the goal is more calm and feeling of security and safety in my life. Is this getting me there? Like, is spending an hour in the morning doing these rituals, like in this routine, does it make me feel more calm, more secure, more safe? Or do I feel like I just pissed away an hour that I could have been spending doing the things that actually make me feel that way? Because if I feel that way, then I'm going to feel recovered. I'm going to feel like I have so much mental capacity to go and do the next things that I need to do in my day. So there's plenty of people that will tell you like, you need 20 minutes of sauna at 185 degrees or more, 3 days a week, and that confers an all-cause mortality benefit of 40%. And then if you do it 4 days a week, it bumps that up to 70%. If you do it 5 days a week, you're at 85%. That's the maximum. And that's, it's like, okay, I need to do 20 minutes of sauna every single day. There are 10 other things that are like that could all add up to about 2 hours of your day. Do you want to go and do that? And they haven't done the research on all 10 of those things together. And they also haven't done the research with that on like, you know, you and your specific like mental predisposition around stress, anxiety, and what fills the rest of your day. So those are that was the context that I wanted to give that particular answer to.
Yeah. I'd also add that it's good to be aware of what the buzz thing is for recovery, because I was just thinking about how when I was first starting CrossFit, everyone was talking about fish oil. It's like, you got to take your fish oil.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't really hear much about fish oil. Now it's just sort of like, oh yeah, everyone knows that. But, you know, there are these things that become like sort of the hot thing to do for recovery. It's like, oh, you got to get all the mobility, like tools, and, you know, got to roll around for 2 hours on your foam roller. Like,
right.
And so I think that all those things can be great tools. It's great to have more tools. Oh, the Theragun. Did you get your Theragun?
Yeah.
But then, are you really doing the basics? And is it just a distraction because it sounds sexy and everyone's got like now a sauna and a cold plunge and a fancy cold plunge, and now they're doing this hot cold exposure therapy? Like, oh, that sounds cool. Like,
yeah.
Or are you just not sleeping enough and eating enough
Totally,
protein
yeah,
and moving your body?
Yeah, the best recovery tools that I know of are like, you know, good exercise program with good diet and a good sleep routine, or like a good sleep, like getting good sleep. Like if you do that, you don't need a recovery tool.
Yeah.
It's shocking, but you don't need a recovery tool. Like you literally wake up and you're like, I feel like I'm a fucking kick ass, you know?
Yeah.
Now that's up to a certain point, because then if your goals change to say like, I want to maximize my training outcomes and I want to push myself, then guess what? You just, now you're not just like training for health and wellness. You're training for performance. You're training to achieve some goal. Like if you're in the gym and you're like, I want to get bigger muscles, or you're in the gym and you're like, I want to get that muscle up. Like now you're going to start pushing your body to intensity levels that might not make you wake up and feel chipper every day.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wake up and feel chipper every day, you're not training hard enough to like get to your goals, you know?
True.
So then we can start to maybe talk about like, well, what specific recovery tools are going to help you get there?
Yeah.
But I would say that like, if somebody's like, I just want to look good and move well, and like, what recovery tool should I have? I'm like, do persist, do the warm up, workout, cool down, do pillars, and follow the practical protein guide, and make sure you're sleeping, and do that for 2 months, and tell me if you need a recovery tool at that point.
Yeah.
If you need a recovery tool at that point, there's something that's broken in one of those 3 buckets that isn't being optimized. You know, you're either pushing yourself too hard in the gym for what you actually wanted, or you weren't real with your goals to me, which was looking good and moving well. Like, you're like, I want to look good, move well, and I want to fucking win. I want to win the race. It's like, okay, well, maybe you might need to do some mobility, or maybe you might want to, invest in a sauna. And now, all that's to say, I do wish everybody had a sauna, and I wish everybody could pop in there for, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, a few times a week. I think that's super powerful, and the evidence really shows that it has a lot of benefits to people, and I wish people would get cold. I think those thermal pressures are pretty awesome.
Yeah. All right.
Super, super beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, we got to get a sauna and a cold plunge in here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Nate,
When?
Nate, I'll talk to my people.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Next up. Shoot. Forgot what it was.
It's all right.
No, I remember.
Okay.
Okay.
I was impressed you you didn't reference your notes. You just kept.
I haven't yet. I actually remembered the topic. All right. The next one was, can you build a great physique from a performance-based program?
Right. This was this one came to me.
That was yours.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, this
No
was
one's
like
asking me that.
this was like somebody who asked, and they told me their background. They're like, well, they basically like did bodybuilding for like 10 years. Then they switched to CrossFit workouts, and they were talking about like building like a great physique. Like, can you build a great physique doing this? And I was like, well, you kind of answer the question. Like, you built your physique, you built your base doing all those years of bodybuilding, and now you're just trying something new and you're maintaining, like if you, and it's working great, so the answer is yes, you can, and maybe no, you can't. Like, it's very dependent upon how you approach that performance type training, the nutrition, the diet that you have, and your training age when you get into the thing. So if you've been bodybuilding for 15 years and you're like, oh, if I start CrossFit, that's going to like change my body. Like, it might, but if it does, it means you really weren't training that hard in those 15 years. Like, because the only stimulus change is going to end up being like most likely the intensity aspect of it. Like, you're just going to do CrossFit, it's going to be way harder than you ever. So you're like, oh, you weren't really training intensely enough to make those changes. There are going to be now movement patterns that are overemphasized in CrossFit, and certain muscle groups that are de-emphasized in CrossFit. So your body might change shape just from the sheer contractions that you're doing. Like, you see people in bodybuilding who have like really well developed delts, like they call them like 3D delts, like where they like kind of almost like stick out from the sides of your bodies. Like, there's not a lot of direct delt work in CrossFit. There's a lot of tricep, some chest. There's shoulder work, obviously. We're pressing. We're not doing a lot of like shoulders in different ranges of motion and different planes like that you would see in a bodybuilding like world. So, if you stack all the CrossFit competitors up next to each other, like they obviously look like they have big shoulders, but you put them next to bodybuilders and it's like, oh yeah, well, the bodybuilder shoulders are like much wider. You get this big taper, this wide V taper, whereas like, CrossFit bodies get labeled as like kind of blocky because like their midsections get really developed from like basically a lot of heavy axial loading, like putting bars on their back, doing touch and go jerks. Like, you got to have like a thick core to like Olympic lift and do that kind of stuff. And then you don't need to have super wide shoulders to be like a good CrossFitter. But in bodybuilding, like you see guys doing like arm day with a belt on their body because they want to keep their core from contracting so much. They want to brace with this belt so that their waist stays narrow and then their shoulders get wide. So it's like, it's just, you get different types of physiques, from the two different types of training. But, somebody who comes in no training at all, they start on like a performance CrossFit program and they do a decent job of like eating, like you can build a great physique doing that. Like if you're coming from nothing to something, like of course you can build muscle, you can build a great physique. But if you've been training for 10 years and you've, even just doing, conventional weight training and you're like, oh, this CrossFit thing's going to like completely change my physique. It only will do that because it increases your intensity, or it maybe increases your training volume, possibly, or you get on like a good nutrition plan at that point and you're like, oh, you start eating, you start eating more whole foods and you start, getting minimally processed stuff on top of good decent training, and you start to like lean out or something like that. Anyhow, any other questions that would come out of that kind of line of thinking?
I was just going to add that I think I've seen a lot of people go into CrossFit and then have a certain degree of change and then it sort of gets stuck. And possibly one theory for that is just that in a typical CrossFit 60-minute workout, there's not a ton of emphasis on actual hypertrophy and muscle mass.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why the competitors that you see at like the top of the world, why they have such muscular physiques is because they're doing so much more training volume than a typical 60-minute class, where they're actually putting in the necessary repetitions and volume of training to really see muscle hypertrophy over time.
Yeah.
And the argument is like, well, if they spent as much time doing what they're doing in CrossFit, doing that in bodybuilding, what would their physiques look like? And they would probably be just as impressive, maybe more impressive, I don't know. It depends. That's obviously very subjective. Like, what does impressive look like to you in terms of a body? But so you can absolutely build a great physique, using performance training, but it's not going to happen without appropriate diet, and for some people, that's just not the best way for them to train to align to a diet that's going to give them the physique that they want. We wrote about this recently where it was like someone jumps into a high performance training model, like a CrossFit as their first exposure, and they're just like thumping themselves with intensity, and they don't even know they don't even know what protein is, and they're just kind of going by the seat of their pants when it comes to food. They're just going to start craving carbs and sugars because their body's using them in their training. And then maybe that might lead them down this slippery slope of just eating bad food or less optimal food choices. And then they're not building a great physique. They're just building their performance, and they're not seeing their body change in a good way.
Yeah. I think that when we're talking about physique, that entails building up more muscle and getting lean. And I think that those two things actually do take intention and a plan rather than I'm just going to show up for whatever the class is today. Totally.
Or intention plan could also be like showing up just for the gym to do 3 sets of 10 of 5 extra. That's not going to get you there either. It's
right.
You need a plan.
You need a plan.
Yeah. And so I think that's where we bridge performance and aesthetics training in a way that's this is very thoughtful and there's a plan. And if you follow this and you implement, any tier of our nutrition approach, you can see dramatic changes.
Yeah.
Which we've seen. You just follow the plan. You end up looking like me.
Yeah. That's what we were talking about. We were talking about there's starting to be a functional bodybuilding look, for men. I think for men and women.
That's dope.
Yeah.
It's like the CrossFit look is well, now there's an FBB look.
Now you got that FBB look.
You got that FBB look. I think I like that.
I see
less
you
blocky.
doing that.
You're less blocky. You got a little bit more taper and you move well.
Yeah. I see that 30x1 tempo across the gym. How you doing?
All right. Well, do we have time for one more? Was it a quick one or is it?
I think my list is done.
Oh.
Make sure.
Booyah.
Oh, wait, one more. Last one. Deloading. What are your general thoughts? Any recommendations?
Yeah. Okay. Well, deloading is a concept where you would either cut your training volume in half, or you cut your intensity or your loads in half for a period of a week. or 3 to 4 days, something like that. And deloading is definitely important, but there's no set schedule that should occur on.
Yeah.
It's funny. I heard somebody say recently, it's like, I've got these people that are like every 4 weeks they deload. And it's like, which means that for every 4 weeks of hard training they do 1 week of load training. And it's like, that's 20% of your year that you're deloading. It's like, if you don't need that, that's a massive amount of training time that you're not training hard. And so you have to look at like, what are the signs that you need to deload? And really there's like kind of two buzzwords that we're trying to avoid: overreaching and then overtraining. And that's why you deload. You don't want to get into a state of overreaching for too long, because that turns into overtraining. Overreaching is inevitable on any progressive overload system. If you come in, do the same weight, the same reps, the same thing, like, you don't ever need to deload. You're also never going to really make that much progress. You're just going to kind of maintain until like you start to lose something about your physique or your strength over time due to age. But if you're trying to like increase weights or increase reps, or you're following one of our programs where there's built-in progression to them, then at some point you should reach a point where you're like, feeling kind of tired. Like I had a bad workout today, and then I had 2 more bad workouts after that. Like I can't seem to get over the hump. And I used to have this I had this so much more commonly in CrossFit. My schedule, actually, my legit like deload schedule was, I would train for 2.5 weeks and then take a 3-day or 4-day deload. Like that was as much as I could handle at the end of my career. And I was very communicative with my coach, and I would feel it. I would feel like tired. I would feel like the workouts were like, I would get done with the workouts and be like, thank God, like I'm so glad that's over. Like I got to do this again tomorrow. Like I was starting to feel that. My appetite would just be like insatiable. Like I was like, oh my God, I can't stop eating. And so that was my, like, and if I pushed it past that, I would get injured.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be like major injuries, but it would be like, damn, now my knee is inflamed and I'm going to feel this for the next 2 months.
Yeah.
And so it was like, had to try and avoid that.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I most disliked about my competitive training in CrossFit, was that there was such a fine line between like overreaching and then hitting that overtraining mark for me. And because we were constantly training new modalities and things all the time, it was really hard to predict like what was, what was happening. Yeah. And I just hated not being able to like know, like, coach, when do I need to shut it down so I don't end up with my back tweaking out of me? It's like, we don't know, it was like too hard to figure out. But now it's like, in a persist cycle, it's like, okay, well, we got 6 weeks. We have 2 6-week cycles back to back, and then we have a testing week. So I think it's like, we offer at the beginning of a cycle, if you just had a hard 6 weeks and you're feeling it, here's a 3 to 5 day deload that you could go on, and then jump right back into training.
Yeah.
At the end of like on week 12 of the 6 back-to-back 6-week cycles, week 12 is going to start to become like this, community-wide deload, because the following week we do intensity. Yeah. Right. So you want to have that period of like downtime before you come back at like maximal intensity so you can get adaptations and you can perform at your best. But just sort of keep in mind, it's like you want to listen to the signs of overreaching and then take 3 to 5 days of training where it's like half volume. You'll feel amazing. If you don't listen to the overreaching signs, you're going to maybe end up in an overtrained state, which is like, now you're looking at like 2 weeks or 3 weeks of recovery time because you pushed it too far. Maybe there's an injury that happens or something.
Yeah. I've been experimenting with a different deload schedule in my training. As I've gotten into my mid-40s, my need for pulling back a little bit has grown. So it's like, if I don't pull back a little in my working up to a heavy single pattern, then it's not going to feel great and I'm going to hit the wall. But I think that that's a difficult thing to prescribe for people because it's so individual when you need it. And women might need to pull back a little bit at certain times of their menstrual cycle to feel really good. So there are a lot of factors on how you decide when to pull back.
I think that's going to end up being a really important part of what we offer when, there's an opportunity for people to get more individualized or more personalized coaching accountability through Persist in the future, and being able to check in with your coach and be like, is this this is what I've been doing. It's like, hey, I can tell like you need a little bit of a deload. Let's do this. Here's the way to go about it. Let's check in 3 days and see how it's going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think in the meantime, I would just encourage people to really be attuned to their body's needs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come in and you've got the workout mapped out for you and you are just feeling like absolute shit, don't do it as written.
Yeah. That's auto-regulating on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. If you have like one workout and then the next workout you're back to normal, like that's not overreaching. Like that's just part of life. If you have like 3 workouts in a row that really suck, or a whole week that sucks, like that's a sign.
That's your sign.
That's your sign.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. We nailed it.
Okay.
Hope you guys enjoyed Hot Takes. Send us your hot take questions and we'll get to them next time. Talk to you soon.
See ya.